The Rising of the Shield Hero is one of those animes that at one point generally felt like it had everything. A strong story, a unique cast of characters, a growing fandom, and a future that looked incredibly promising. But somewhere along the way, that momentum completely died, and now the series is often remembered as an anime that lost the very thing that made it special in the first place. So what happened? Why did Shield Hero fall off so hard? That is what I want to talk about today. Just like every other video on my channel, I'm going to give some quick context on each season so my points make sense, but I'm not going to go into a full breakdown of every arc. The main focus here is the criticism. With that out of the way, sit back and enjoy my video on the rise and fall of the Rising of the Shield Hero. The story follows Nafumi Iwatani, a 20-year-old college student who gets summoned to another world alongside 3 other men and is chosen as one of the 4 cardinal heroes. Each hero gets a legendary weapon, but Nafumi gets the shield, which is immediately treated as the weakest and least respected of the 4.
What is it?
Oh, nothing. I just assumed it was because you're the shield hero.
Ha! You too?
Well, yeah, I mean, it only makes sense.
As far as I've ever seen, the Shielder class that specializes in the shield is for losers because no true gamers ever play it.
What?
While the other come off as cocky, flashy, and overly confident, Nafumi starts off as the most grounded one, just trying to understand the world he has been thrown into. That falls apart almost immediately when Mine, the king's daughter, betrays him, robs him, and falsely accuses him of assault. From that point on, Nafumi is hated by the kingdom, abandoned by everyone around him, and left with almost no way to survive. Since he is the shield hero, he cannot even fight properly on his own, which only makes everything worse. Eventually, he buys Raphtalia, a demi-human slave, that's just because he has no other choice. As the two begin working together, their bond slowly becomes the emotional core of the story. Then, by the time the first waves hit and Modiatsu challenges him over Raphtalia, the show makes the point very clear. Nafumi may be hated by everyone, but he understands what being a hero actually means more than the other 3 do. And that is what makes these first 4 episodes deserve their own chapter. In my opinion, this is not just the best part of season 1, but the best part of the entire series. These episodes do an incredible job of establishing Nafumi's motives, his personality, and the cruelty of the world around him. More importantly, they also show why the other heroes feel so different from him. They treat the world like a game. Nafumi does not. That small difference in mindset is what sets up almost every major conflict in the series. The brilliance of these episodes is that they make Nafumi compelling without making him perfect. He is bitter, angry, defensive, and eventually desperate enough to buy a slave just to survive. That is dark, and the story knows it's dark, but that is exactly why it works. It's not trying to sell you a clean, idealized fantasy world. It is showing you a world full of corruption, bias, and cruelty, and forcing its protagonist to adapt to it. You also have Raphtalia, who quickly proves she is more than just a sidekick, and a villain in mind who is also instantly affected because the audience immediately understands why they hate her. Add in excellent world building, strong emotional hooks, and a great dub performance from Nafumi's voice actor, and you have an opening stretch that feels genuinely special. These first 4 episodes are as close to a masterpiece as the Shield Hero gets. They are emotional, sharp, focused, and full of tension. Most importantly, they promise a story that feels smarter, darker, and more character-driven than the average isekai. And that promise is exactly why the fall hurts so much. After episode 4, season 1 keeps that momentum going for a while. Nafumi builds his party with Raphtalia and Philo, takes on ugly jobs the other heroes ignore, and slowly proves that he is doing more real good for the world than the other people who are publicly praised as heroes. The story then expands through Melty, Glass, Vittoria, and the Church Conspiracy, and eventually the Queen's return, all while setting up the larger truth behind the waves and the existence of other worlds. So overall, yes, I still think season 1 is strong. It has mysterious momentum, political tension, and solid emotional payoff. Nafumi goes from being a hated outcast to someone whose name is finally clean, and that gives the season a satisfying sense of progression. But even here, you can already see the writing problem that will get much worse later on. The other 3 heroes are unbelievably stupid. And yes, I know that is the point. I understand that their ignorance is supposed to drive the plot and highlight the difference between them and Nafumi. but there's a massive difference between flawed characters and characters who seem incapable of learning basic lessons. Ren, Itsuki, and especially Moriyasu constantly make catastrophic mistakes, justify those mistakes with terrible reasoning, and then you repeat the same behavior over and over and over again. Ren is supposed to be intelligent, yet somehow overlooks consequences that feel painfully obvious. Itsuki is supposed to be observant and justice driven, yet repeatedly prove he has no real understanding of what leadership or reform actually require, and Moriyasu is just unbearable. Even after the corruption is laid out directly in front of him, even after Mind's lies become obvious, he still refuses to think for himself. At some point, this stops being character writing and starts feeling like forced stupidity for the sake of keeping the plot going. That is my biggest frustration with season 1. It is still the last good season, but is also where the cracks begin to show, because once the story starts depending on those characters never learning, never changing, and never really reflecting, it traps itself in a cycle it never really escapes. That said, season 1 still lands where it counts. Naofumi proving its innocence, the queen exposing the corruption, and the reveal that the waves involve other worlds all feel like strong payoffs and even stronger setup. By the end of the season, I was still excited. I could not wait for season 2, and then season 2 happened. Season 2 is very simple when you strip it down. First, Naofumi deals with the Spirit Tortoise crisis and learns that Kaio is manipulating it. Then he chases Kaio into another world, rescues Raphtalia and Philo, teams up with characters like Kizuna, Glass, Lark, and 3S, and eventually defeats Kaio. That is basically the season. And honestly, that is part of the problem. Season 2 feels like the point where Shield Hero starts losing its identity. It becomes more generic, more rushed, and far less emotionally engaging. The Spirit Tortoise arc feels like a side quest stretched too far. Kaio is a painfully boring villain, and even the larger ideas the season introduces never feel as interesting as the show wants them to be. Instead of building naturally on Naofumi's journey, the season feels like it has just been moving pieces around. Kizuna is decent. I actually liked her. She has a fun personality, works well with the group, and does not drag the story down. Kaio, on the other hand, is the exact opposite. He is one-dimensional, smug, and boring in a way that feels more annoying than threatening. The series tries to frame him like a dark reflection of Naofumi, but he ends up feeling more like a generic anime villain who exists because the plot needs someone to punch. Even when the show hints at more, none of it really lands. The other heroes are barely worth mentioning this season because they are basically useless, again. And that is really what makes season 2 so disappointing. It is not just that it's worse than season 1, it is that it feels hollow. Naofumi's main emotional arc already had a satisfying payoff in season 1, but instead of finding a meaningful next step for him, the show just keeps recycling the same anger, the same distrust, and the same protective instincts without evolving them. So instead of feeling like a new chapter in his life, season 2 feels like a weaker intimidation of what already worked. It also leans far too hard on convenient emotional power-ups and power of friendship resolutions. And for me, that's always a bad sign. Usually when the story keeps needing these kind of shortcuts, it means the writer either made the villain too strong or failed to build the conflict properly. Season 2 is not where the Shield Hero completely dies, but is where the downfall clearly begins. And somehow, it gets even worse. Season 3 and 4 are basically about Naofumi cleaning up the fallout of everything that came before. Season 3 is centered on rebuilding, fixing the damages from the Spirit Tortoise disaster, restoring his territory, rescuing La Llorona's people, and trying to get the other heroes functioning again before the Phoenix becomes the next major threat. Then Season 4 shifts more towards Raphtalia, with political conflict involving Q-Tenlo, assassination attempts, bloodlight drama, and her connection to the throne. On paper, that sounds fine. In execution, I found these 2 seasons exhausting. Not because every single idea is terrible, but because so much of it feels weightless. The show keeps introducing new characters, new kingdoms, new lore, new side plots, and new emotional beats, but very little of it carries the same depth or attachment that season 1 had. It feels like the story is constantly expanding outward without strengthening what already was there. And that's the core issue. Later season Shield Hero mistakes more content for more substance. Take Windia and Galleon for example. The anime clearly wants the subplot to hit emotionally. It wants the dragon connection and the confrontation to feel meaningful. But the problem is that the anime does not give those characters enough focus beforehand for the payoff to land properly. So instead of feeling tragic, it feels overcomplicated. It is not bad in concept, it's just bad in execution. The same problem shows up all over season 3 and 4. Characters are introduced like they matter, scenes are framed like they are important, and emotional moments are treated like big deals, but the show often has done not enough work to earn that reaction from the audience. Alta is a good example of that. The anime clearly wants us to see her as an important, emotionally meaningful, and deeply loyal to Naofumi. I understand what the story is trying to do with her, and I do think that she has some solid moments, but I never got nearly as attached to her as the show clearly wanted me to. She feels less like a naturally developed character, more like someone the narrative keeps pushing in front of the camera and telling me to care about. And that is the huge problem. Because later Shield Hero constantly relies on forced attachment, it wants emotional payoff without putting in enough emotional buildup. It wants political tension without making the politics interesting enough to carry whole arcs. It wants new side characters to feel important, but it rarely gives them enough time, presence, or purpose to actually stick. To be fair, there are still very decent things here. Ren's growth is probably the strongest out of the other heroes, and I did enjoy seeing him become less prideful and more self-aware. Full was also cool. I liked Full. There are scattered moments where the show almost feels like it's getting back on track, but those moments are scattered. Most of the time, season 3 and 4 feel like the series is just moving from one plot event to the next because it has to keep moving. Not because the story is naturally building towards something powerful, but because it needs another kingdom, another reveal, another conflict, another character, another scene. And then you get weird choices that make the writing feel even sloppier, like the reveal with Keel. It is one of those moments that feel like it exists just because the author wanted to throw something random into the mix.
私もです。それにしてもその格好は創作意欲がかきたてられたそうです。みんなだがそう言うなら。直文様、目が
It is not deep in the story, it does not meaningfully develop the character, and it does not add anything important to the long-term direction of the show. It just happens. That is what later Shield Hero feels like in general. Things just happen. Not all of it is terrible, not all of it is broken, but so much of it feels aimless, padded, or emotionally undercooked. Instead of building on that sharp, character-driven foundation of the first season, the anime keeps adding more and more pieces while giving me fewer and fewer reasons to care about them. And that, to me, is where the series truly loses itself. So is the Rising of the Shield Hero worth it? Yes and no. If you are here for the first season, and especially for the first 4 episodes, then yes, I do think there is something worth watching. There's a strong hook, a compelling protagonist, good emotional tension, and a version of the story that genuinely feels like it could have been something special. But once you get past that point, the series starts to collapse under weak character writing, repetitive mistakes, rushed arcs, shallow villains, messy plot choices, and an increasing reliance on forced drama instead of earned payoff. That is why Shield Hero has a strong rise and a tragic fall. Until our next adventure, I hope you all have a good day. Goodbye.